what can I say that would even begin to tackle the problems in that question of where in the brain is teenage risk behavior located. So maybe we could start there, about what are some of the epistemological errors that you see and that I see, and then we can work from there into larger frames.
Of course, it's a very interesting question in many ways, because if I go back in time, at the 90s, this brain issue that later was named the Decade of Brains by, I don't know, Clinton or some American president, was in power at that time, was a kind of shocking idea for the people working in psychotherapy field. And it was shocking in the way that we realized that life is not like that you can reduce the mental activities into a brain or locate it into some point of brain. But of course it became a very big business and big idea. And now, 20 years later, all of a sudden, we are in a situation in which this neuroscience really has opened up a new door to it. So it's a very interesting question to put. The thing that make us afraid, scared to death, that psychotherapy and all this is disappearing from the field, and it took over all over. The idea, at the same time, something has happened that it is the one, and now I'm speaking not only the brain or that part, but making that kind of research from perhaps a bit different point of view that really has helped us to see other new parts of human life on the whole. And well, my immediate reaction, of course, was the same while listening to the story, that it's really so, how would I put it, so naive idea to think that you can, naive and dangerous and whatsoever, that you can really locate something in some part of brain. And as it is also the idea that you can reduce something of the mental activities or, let's say, mind into the brain function. And at the same time, looking at from a relational and interactional point of view is so important to understand and go across this dualistic boundary of life.
Because there's, I was telling my daughter about it, and she said, just think of what that question says about what they think about adolescence. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what is risky behavior? I have been doing some research with a group of people in Italy who are working with paralysis. And the work that they're doing, you would be actually really interested in looking at it, I'm quite sure, because it has to do with how in a paralyzed situation or terminal pain, there is a pathology, right? We have a pathology, there's that word again. And the way that they are addressing that pathology is not to address the frozen arm or the place that hurts, but to help the whole person, body, mind, language, memory, the whole process, to figure out how to make sense of its world again. So that while most treatment centers would have to do with working the muscles and opening this up, these people would work on a process that would have more to do with, well, I'll just give you a quick example. So they would say something like, using a verbal hypothesis, what would it feel like to run your finger around the outside of this piece of this pad of paper? Okay, so can you start to see what's happening there? That it's a verbal hypothesis that is sourcing information from the memory here and into the verbal sphere, and then into a relational expression. And then, but there hasn't even, no one's even touched this. And so then, with the patient's good hand, they would very slowly, because the kind of information that you receive at this sort of focus and attention level is so deep, to begin to look and feel and experience what that is. And then the question is, what was the difference between what you thought you were going to feel and what you did feel? It's that difference that makes a difference. The generation of information in the body, mind, and in the mind, and in the verbal skills. I mean, the whole process is in both the brain and the body and the eyes and the relationship. And the relationship to what is a pad of paper, right? That's not outside of the field here. We know what this is. So it I think, is an interesting way of kind of getting at this difference between mind and brain.
You could say, or I could say that concerning actually thinking of this research that we are doing, we have had a bit funny discussion among us, because there were very few study programs that were funded to look at this human mind. And I knew that there were also some candidates in the field of psychotherapy, but none of them were funded. We were the only one in this piece. But all those others who did not get funded, they were basing on of brain issue. They located the human mind in the brain. And I'm secretly very, very surprised and happy inside of myself that those who supported the research, they actually already had a bit broader idea that even if this neuroscience is looking at what happens in the brain functions, and there are machines to do it, it's not the brain, but it's how is it related with the entire body, and of course with other issues of what is relevant. I don't know if they realize something like that, but at least we want to see it, that it's a brain that is a part of the interactional system in all the time, in ongoing interaction with everything that happens in our bodies, and of course our interest is to look at what happens in the relation in addition to that.
Gregory had a whole section in Mind and Nature that was dedicated to this question of mental process. I think the most difficult part of that film, for those of you who will see it again someday, is the part where Gregory says, an animal really should be considered as a body of ideas. The symmetry of the body is an idea upon which other ideas are built.
I wrote it up.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, what does he mean by idea? Perhaps you know?
What he means by idea is that it's part of a mental process. That the parts of a mental process are ideas. And so that when he's looking at mental process, I want you to first really hear me when I say this is not about only human beings. That we're talking about the mind, the mental process that is also a jungle, or a dog, or really any ecological system. There are criteria that it should be an aggregate. I could read them to you, but you might get more confused. Have you read a lot of Gregory's work? It's confusing.
But there is a risk, as I see, as has happened also. We, in our field, the social constructionism has been a very powerful idea during the last 20 years. It was started at the 60s by Berger and Luckmans from a sociological point of view, and then it was taken to our field, and it was very much going on with that idea that in a more precise to say that things that we observe are descriptions, are constructions, as it was said. And because I was, that's what I wrote it up, because I think that there is also a very severe problem in that idea. It's very easy to follow in some part of that, the things of mental problems, they are constructions. Based on how do we see risk behavior or schizophrenia or an animal or something like that. But it's still within the limits of dualism, because there is the description, a kind of how would you call it, mental, and what is mental? That's something without a concrete body, and then there is the physical world. And if you are in this division, you still follow this, that's Cartesian dualism, and that's a very big problem in this social constructionist idea. I have to say, it's not easy to me to say, because it was very important for me long time, the idea of this social constructionist idea, and now I really see that it's very limited view of life. And then I question when I noticed that in what he was saying, that it would be interesting to make a more precise look. What was his idea, his thoughts about that? There was one point, he made some, I don't know if he meant to do it, it was only short notion of the implicit, and he pointed the right brain, which is of course one very important and interesting part of this becoming more across the boundary of this mental and bodily. Yeah.
Well, because so much of what we know, we don't know that we know. And in that sense, the constructionist aspects get very furry. They start to fall to pieces. But let's look at this mind thing. And there's some criteria here. There's 6 of them. And the first one is that a mind is an aggregate of interacting parts or components. A mind is a pulling together of interacting pieces. Hold on, let me go back. Gregory says, I shall argue that the phenomena which we call thought, evolution, ecology, life, and learning occur only in systems that satisfy these criteria of mental process. So, mind is an aggregate of interacting parts. 2, the interaction between parts of mind is triggered by difference. And difference is a non-substantial phenomenon not located in space or time. I'll skip the rest of it. 3, mental process requires collateral energy. This is so confusing for me. Really what he's trying to do is to say that it requires food. It requires sunlight. It requires energy. Mental process requires circular or more complex chains of determination. Don't you wish I had this on a PowerPoint right now? Oh, it's actually on. Okay. In that case, you can see it. Five. In mental process, the effects of difference are to be regarded as transforms of events which preceded them. The rules of such transformation must be comparatively stable, i.e., more stable than the content. But are themselves subject to transformation. And 6, the description and classification of these processes of transformation disclose a hierarchy of logical types immanent in the phenomenon. Easy peasy, huh? Yeah. There are 2 famous examples that he used to use. One of them is the example of the blind man with the stick. And we ask, where is the end of the man? Because clearly the information is coming through the stick, it's an extension. And then that also extends into his world. So is the end of the man the edge of his fingers, or is it the stick, or is it the sidewalk, or is it where's the man end? And then the other one is the image of the man with an axe who's going to chop down a tree. It's an unfortunate image in this era of ecology, but nevertheless. And in that is the same thing of where's the end of the man. Because there's this, the axe is there as a tool within which he has a relationship with the natural world upon which his survival is dependent, right? So where's the end of the man? You know, one of the things I was noticing this morning is that same sort of questioning emerging in the way that we were able to see how those people were breathing together, or the way that their heart rates were working together. And it makes, to look at the system as one mind is very easy in those diagrams that you make.
I think that this should be added, the idea, into the relational idea in some way to the point of view that who are the one who are in relation. In Bateson's idea, of course, there is a lot of ideas that the relation occur in the descriptions, in the ideas, but then there are those who participate in the situation in which we describe or experience, and in some way that has to be added to have a kind of more comprehensive idea, if we want to go that way. And of course I could say that it's our bodies that make the mind. If we sit in a situation with our clients, for instance, who all of a sudden starting to cry with the memory of the dead grandmother, and I feel the sadness in my body, so I could claim that the mind is there in our experience. Or yesterday we were meeting with, in the place Richard is working, we had a group with the entire people, with the entire personnel and some of the people who were living there. And one of them had a lot to say, very much to say, and it became very tense situation. I felt that in my body, in a way, because it seems to be very difficult to answer his comment, and he was speaking more and more so much that the rest of the people did not have so much time there. And then we had a break, and then I proposed that could we have a dialogue, and we were speaking with 2 of us. And I realized immediately that the big tension in my stomach disappeared. Then we came very close to each other, and I started to ask him, and he said that those people, they listen more to themselves as they listen to me. And then I asked, did you say that they listen more themselves than they listen to you? Yes, he says. And I got more and more warmer feeling here without knowing what he is actually talking about, what kind of experiences. And then we stopped, and then the people around had their comments, and he was sitting very silently, sometimes closing his eyes and listening what the people were saying. And I really felt in my body that this is very different compared to how it was before we came into the break, without any a kind of big explanation or meaning or something like that happening. So only one example of that, how important it really is that our, what's the word, sensings in our bodies would become a part of the situation in which mind is immersing or constructed or done or whatsoever. Or perhaps it's not neither of them. Perhaps it's not constructed or done, it's coming like a cloud into the sky.
William Blake said that a tear is an intellectual thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good, because I'm very a bit, how would I put it, very, or at least a little, not very, but little scared or tensed to speak of these things to people working in our field. Some years ago, I started to speak of love. I always, when I finish my presentation, I have a last slide of dialogue being a part of love. And 90% of people like it very much. 10% don't like it. I thought that it would be half and half. Half would be furious of speaking of love without these serious issues. And the same concerns also the issue of this embodied involvement into the conversation. And that's also something that I think that people would be a bit scared and start to blame me as being mysticist and so on and so on. But it seems to be that therapists like that idea. Not even 10%. I have not heard any critical point of view. But it's something that we realize without having no words of this. Something that when we are, for instance, yesterday there were men who really liked the idea that yes, that's true. I feel it in my body. So that when you say that Blake said that tears are very intelligent, so perhaps there is so much more intelligence in what our bodies are saying and what they are doing together than we ever realize. It's not only how clever we are in the thinking and in our brains, but how much can we come together in and sharing the moments.
And the forms of communication that are taking place that we have actually no conscious vocabulary for. But certainly they're taking place between people who are in interaction. And sometimes the person that's not there is also part of the conversation. And Jaakko, I mean, it's a little bit radical in the world that we live in right now to be doing the research that you're doing and getting away with it.
It's very radical, yeah. And of course, if we follow the idea that I really think this way, that it's not only a question of wave of interest that we have, but we are in a breakthrough of a new understanding of human life. And if it is the case that we follow that the new understanding of human life, that you are much more in me than we ever realize. And at the same time, we think of these things that happens in the world. That happened 2 weeks ago in Copenhagen. People start to shoot each other because they think differently. So perhaps that could be one kind of reaction of the idea that not in the whole world you are not the same kind of person as I am because you are Jewish and I'm Muslim and whatsoever kind of ideas may appear. So that the politics of this ISIS system that really doing cruel things, it's totally kind of as if being of a different world, but perhaps it's more a kind of reaction that it's all too painful idea to think that we are much nearly connected and with each other than we ever realized. That it's also very radical in that way.
Well, and it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
That those connections and that interaction extends into the natural world.
Yeah. That's true.
And I'm going to be here to not let you forget that, because because it's really important.
It is.
It's really important, and it's if we can make any kind of objectification, we can make all kinds of objectification.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to objectify the natural world we live in, we're going to objectify each other.
Yes.
So I think it's the same error in thinking. You know, right now we have all of these, of course, these enormous ecological issues, and my friends in the ecology movement are starting to lose hope. Should we get a carbon tax? Should we, put particles in the sky and geoengineer the climate? What should we do? And there's this kind of low murmuring dream that maybe we'll find some other planet to move to. It's a kind of a sci-fi concept.
Yes.
But that is a very deep misunderstanding of everything from leafcutter ants to art to everything you've said today. We are part of something so much bigger. This conversation that we're in is so large. And it's taken so long to evolve. And when you think about how long it's taken those ants and that enzyme and that bacteria, and you think about interrupting that process, and that it has to reorganize, and how long that will take. I mean, just in terms of the bioflora in your body and the relationship to the sun and the dirt and the food and the animals and the seasons and the, your grandmother's recipes and we can't go to Mars unless we take everything with us. I mean, in that sense that there's a very deep synchronicity that we're inside of. And it certainly is there between people, but also in our natural environment.
And perhaps that's easy to realize. When you go into the nature, you see the difference, you realize the difference, how it is different to be walking by the small lake instead of walking in the city of Copenhagen and so on. I have to add one thing came up into my mind, and of course in our field thinking of this, that we are much more connected, and not only connected, but we are much more in of each other than we realize. Perhaps that makes it also understandable why something in psychiatry is so aggressive reaction to these ideas. Because if you build up the field that there is something like schizophrenia, there is something in the imbalance of your neurological system that is related with the depression, and those people who have this problem, they are to become psychotic or depressive, and the whole field is built up of this idea. And then if you follow that, what we are up here, there is no such things so different. There aren't any differences. The one who become depressed or the one who become psychotic is exactly as I am. And he and she is inside of me as I'm inside of him in a kind of situation. And this can be very painful idea that really can cause aggressive reactions to the idea.
Well, there's a sense of urgency. I mean, when you're with someone and they're in a lot of pain, there's a kind of urgency to identify them as separate and to deal with the problem and to apply a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, I see the same thing in the ecology world.
In what way?
Well, like a carbon tax, for example.
Yeah.
We have an emergency. And in that emergency, the need to address a problem that is acute gets mixed up in somehow separating it from the web of relations that it exists inside of. And I'm not saying we shouldn't deal with acute emergencies. What I am saying is being careful that we don't at the same time cut the connections.
Yeah.
And
I have a proposal.
I want to hear it.
Yeah. I've become very curious what those there are
I'm
thinking.
so curious.
Yeah.
Let's ask them.
Yes, and it's always very easy to have your own thoughts more alive if you have 2 minutes some words with your neighbor, and thereafter we could ask how do you.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes thinking too complex about issues which are not to solve here and now, and it can take many, many years, will remove our possibilities to see solvable problems. Problems which can be solved easily, which can have good results, we forget it, thinking about unsolvable problems. And I believe it removes our possibility to enjoy the life. For example, when you mentioned that beer, maybe this guy, maybe he just say, hey mate, damn good beer, cheers. That would be better for him, maybe to get a real connection than he thinking, oh, what is this lady is talking about? Take it easy, just a comment. I think some people, they need to hear simplicity in order to make a connection.
I fundamentally think that when we can see more, there's more to love. And my sister in the film asks this beautiful question, which is, what is it about the way that we perceive that makes us not see the delicate interdependencies that we live in? And that because we don't see them, we break them. So this development of being able to see complexity is a push. It's hard. It hurts a little. But you know what? It also really hurts to cause damage that you didn't mean to. And the alternative to at least, I'm not sure that we can ever know the truth about who Jaakko is. But what's interesting, I think, is to know him better, to have a deeper understanding of him, to understand more about the relationships that are his life. Not because I want to sum them up. I started this morning saying the film that I made about my dad, I didn't want to complete him. I wanted to leave it open so that new connections could happen. But in that same sense, that when we are looking for those kind of linkages, we look in a different way. And that in some ways, just that process is helpful, even if it takes us some time. But it's not simple. And we do live in a world in which we want, 4 steps, to have 5 applications, to have, a formula to figure it out. And when we're, like Gregory says at the end of the film, when we're trying to understand living things, we can make mistakes doing that if we apply logic in that way. So on the one hand, I'm with you, mate, let's have a beer. And on the other hand, I think we can do both. I think we can have a beer and be able to say, this is a beautiful thing. This beer touches all these different people in all these parts of history and culture. And that's beautiful.
and it's always different. Every day I speak all the day, perhaps today also. My body asks for a beer. and if it does not get it, it starts to sparkle. Jaakko, where is that beer? Where is it? But it's very different beer compared to the beer that I have in the evening with my friends. So that it's relational again in many
it's
in
not
many
the
ways.
same beer, is
it's
it?
not the same beer. No,
you
no, no,
can't
no.
drink
not
the same beer twice,
no,
Jaakko.
No. Yeah.
There was this Einstein thing about that you couldn't solve a problem at the same conscience level as it was from. And I think we have a tendency to go up a level to try to solve it. But I think maybe if we go down a level to a more frontal level, I think this level might be love, connecting it all. But I'm in doubt that maybe it is beer. but taking it down instead of taking it up and complicating it.
I would be really pleased if you would go on and take something that you have heard today into your practice with your clients. Think of something, and if you can live with him some of the ideas, so that's the way that we have a kind of knowledge if this is relevant or if this is not relevant. And of course, I suppose it's very relevant. And if it is relevant, what are the new things that we can learn to help our clients more in their distress?
And I think that when there is that caring that you're talking about, it makes the stakes higher. If I had been making a film about someone else, I don't know that I would have had to look as carefully as I did. In sort of the same way that I saw in Jaakko's film footage there, that when people are close, when we care about things, we have the potential of applying more of ourselves to them. When we don't care, we have this illusion of objectivity. I'm not sure, there are times I'm sure when it's useful, but in terms of, when Jaakko brought up this question of love, I think it's relevant. But I also think it's a way of life, not just a body of professional development tools. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.